Number 5645. And the man brought the men to Joseph's house. This signifies the first introduction into the good from the celestial of the spiritual, as is evident from the signification of bringing, namely introduction, from the signification of Jacob's sons, namely the truths of the church and the natural, from the signification of a house, namely good, and hence also the church, for the church is the church from good, and from the representation of Joseph, namely the celestial of the spiritual, see above. From this it is plain that the man's bringing the men to Joseph's house signifies that the truths in the natural were to be introduced into the good from the celestial of the spiritual. The first introduction is signified because they now only ate with Joseph and did not know him. By this is signified a general conjunction, which is the first introduction. For truth from the divine then flows in generally and is not discerned. But when the truth which flows in is observed, there is then a second conjunction, which is signified by Joseph's manifesting himself to his brethren, as related in a subsequent chapter. Number 5646, verses 18 to 23. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house. And they said, Because of the silver that was returned in our bags in the beginning are we brought, to involve us, and to fall upon us, and to take us for servants and our asses. And they came near to the man that was over Joseph's house, and they spake unto him at the door of the house, and said, O my lord, we came indeed down in the beginning to buy food. And it came to pass when we came to the inn, and we opened our bags, and behold every one silver in the mouth of his bag, our silver in full weight, and we have brought it back in our hand. And other silver have we brought down in our hand to buy food. We know not who put our silver in our bags. And he said, Peace be to you, fear not. Your God and the God of your father gave you a hidden gift in your bags. Your silver came to me. And he brought Simeon out unto them. And the men were afraid, signifies a drawing back. Because they were brought to Joseph's house, signifies because the truths that belong to the natural were to be adjoined and subjected to the internal. And they said, Because of the silver that was returned in our bags in the beginning are we brought, signifies because truth in the exterior natural appears to be given freely, they were therefore to be in subjection. To involve us and to fall upon us signifies that on this account they were to be reduced under absolute power. And to take us for servants and our asses signifies until whatever is in either natural be as nothing. And they came near to the man that was over Joseph's house, signifies the doctrinals of the church. And they spake unto him at the door of the house, signifies taking counsel of them about introduction. And said, O my Lord, signifies attestation. We came indeed down in the beginning to buy food, signifies a disposition to procure good for truths. And it came to pass when we came to the inn and we opened our bags, signifies introspection into the exterior natural. And behold every one silver in the mouth of his bag, signifies that it was clearly seen that truths had been given as it were freely. Our silver in full weight signifies truths according to each one's state. And we have brought it back in our hand, signifies that what had been given freely would be in submission as far as possible. And other silver have we brought down in our hand to buy food, signifies that there is a disposition to procure good by means of truth from another source. We know not who put our silver in our bags, signifies non-belief from ignorance of the source of truth in the exterior natural. And he said, Peace be to you, fear not, signifies that it is well, let them not despair. Your God and the God of your father signifies the Lord's divine human. gave you a hidden gift in your bags, signifies that it was from him, apart from any prudence of theirs. Your silver came to me, signifies that it will seem as truth procured by them. And he brought Simeon out unto them, signifies that it adjoined willing to truths. Number 5647. And the men were afraid. This signifies a drawing back, as is evident from the signification of being afraid, here, namely, a drawing back, that is, from conjunction with the internal. Fear arises from various causes, as from danger of loss of life, of gain, honor, and reputation, also of being brought into servitude and thus losing freedom, and with it the life's delight. This is the subject treated of in what now follows. For they were afraid lest they should be adjoined to the internal, and thereby lose what was their own, and with it their freedom, and with freedom the life's delight, because this depends on freedom. This is the reason why the men were afraid signifies a drawing back lest they should be adjoined. Here in advance this conjunction must be explained briefly, that is, the conjunction of the external or natural man with the internal or spiritual. The external or natural man reigns from life's earliest age, and knows not that there is an internal or spiritual man. When, therefore, the man is being reformed, and from being natural or external is beginning to become spiritual or internal, the natural at first rebels, for it is taught that the natural man is to be subjugated, that is, that all its longings together with the things that confirm them are to be rooted out. Hence, when the natural man is left to itself, it thinks that in this way it will utterly perish, for it supposes that the natural is everything, and it is wholly ignorant that in the spiritual there are things immeasurable and unutterable. And when the natural man so thinks, it draws back and is unwilling to be subjected to the spiritual. This is what is here meant by their fear. Number 5648. Because they were brought to Joseph's house. This signifies because the truths that belong to the natural were to be adjoined and subjected to the internal, as is evident from the signification of to be brought to Joseph's house, namely, to be conjoined and subjected to the internal. For Joseph represents the internal, because he represents truth from the divine, or the celestial of the spiritual. And a house signifies man's internal as well as his external. Here the internal, as it is called Joseph's house. And to be brought, that is, to the internal, signifies to be adjoined, and therefore to be subjected. The reason is that when the natural is adjoined to the internal, it is then subjected to it. For the command, which had before belonged to the natural man, then becomes the spiritual man's, of which command of the Lord's divine mercy more will be said in the following pages. A few words must here be added in regard to the internal sense. The internal sense of the word is especially for those who are in the other life. When those who are there are with a man who is reading the word, they perceive it according to the internal sense and not according to the external. For they understand no human words, but only the sense of the words, and this not according to the man's natural thoughts, but according to their thoughts which are spiritual. Into this spiritual sense, the natural sense that is with the man is at once transmuted, just as one instantaneously turns the language of another into his own, which is different. Thus the sense of natural human thought is turned into spiritual. For spiritual language or speech is proper to the angels, and natural language or speech to men. There is so sudden a change as of one language into another, because there is a correspondence of each and all things in the natural world with those in the spiritual world. Now as the internal sense of the word is chiefly for those who are in the spiritual world, such things are here mentioned in the internal sense as are for them, and as are pleasant and delightful to them. Yet the more interior such things are, the more remote are they from the apprehension of men, to whom only the things of the world and the body are pleasant and delightful. And this being the case, they hold in contempt the spiritual things that belong to the internal sense, and also loathe them. Let every one examine himself, and see whether the things contained in the internal sense of the verses that now follow are not worthless and distasteful to him, although they are what the angelic societies take the greatest delight in. From this it may be plain to one who reflects what a difference there is between the delights of men and the delights of angels, and also what the angels regard as wisdom, and what men regard as wisdom. That the angels find wisdom in such things as man thinks worthless and dislikes, and that man finds wisdom in such things as the angels care nothing about, and many in such things as the angels reject and shun. Number 5649. And they said, Because of the silver that was returned in our bags in the beginning are we brought. This signifies that because truth in the exterior natural appears to be given freely, they were therefore to be in subjection, as is evident from the signification of the silver being returned, namely truth bestowed freely, and from the signification of a bag, namely the threshold of the exterior natural, and from the signification of to be brought, namely to be adjoined or subjected. The subject is to be understood as follows. As it was perceived that the truths of external knowledge in the exterior natural were given freely, and would therefore be enticed to conjoin themselves with the internal, and thereby be in subjection to it, they would, as just said, be deprived of their freedom, and thereby of all the delight of life. Man is quite ignorant that this is the case, namely, that it is perceived that truths of external knowledge are bestowed freely in the natural mind, whether exterior or interior. The reason is that he has no such perception, for he does not know at all what is bestowed on him freely, still less what is stored up in the exterior natural, and what in the interior. The reason why he has not this perception is usually that worldly and earthly things are dear to him, and not heavenly and spiritual things. And therefore he does not believe in any influx through heaven from the Lord, or therefore that anything is given him. Yet all the truth that he rationally infers from external knowledges, and supposes to be due to his own ability, is given him. Still less can man perceive whether it is placed in the exterior natural or in the interior, because he is unaware that the natural is twofold, namely, the outer which approaches to the external senses, and the inner which recedes from them and turns to the rational. As man knows nothing about either the one or the other, he can therefore have no perception about such things. For the knowledge of a thing must come first in order that there may be a perception of it. Yet the angelic communities know and perceive these things well and clearly, not only what is bestowed on them freely, but also where it is, as may be seen from the following experience. When any spirit who is good, and therefore capable, comes into an angelic community, he acquires at the same time all the knowledge and intelligence of the community which he had not had before, and he at first supposes that he had known and understood it before, and from himself. But when he reflects, he perceives that it is freely bestowed on him through that angelic community by the Lord, and he also knows from the angelic community whether it is in the exterior or in the interior natural. For there are angelic communities in the exterior natural and others in the interior natural. Yet the natural which belongs to them is not such a natural as man has, but it is a spiritual natural, which has become spiritual by being conjoined and subjected to the spiritual. From all this it is evident that the things here related in the internal sense take place actually in the other life, namely, that they perceive what is given them freely, as well as where it is stored up, although man at this day knows nothing of such things. But in ancient times those of the Church knew such things, being taught them by their external knowledges and also their doctrinals. They were interior men. But since those times men have become more and more external, insomuch that at this day they are in the body, thus in the extreme. A sign of this is that they do not even know what the spiritual and the internal are, nor believe in their existence. Nay, to such an extreme have they receded in the body from interior things, that they do not even believe that there is a life after death, nor that there is a heaven nor a hell. Nay, by receding from interior things they have gone to such an extreme, and have become so stupid in spiritual things, as to believe that man's life is like that of beasts, and therefore that man will die in like manner. And strange to say, the learned believe so more often than the simple, and any one who thinks otherwise is accounted by them a simpleton. Number 5650. To involve us and to fall upon us. This signifies that on this account they were to be reduced under absolute power, as is evident from the signification of to involve anyone, namely to make him out guilty, and from the signification of to fall upon anyone, namely to get him into one's power, here absolute power, for it follows, and to take us for servants and our asses. The truth is that before the natural man is conjoined with the spiritual, or the external with the internal, he is left to think whether he desires to get rid of the lusts arising from the love of self and of the world, together with the things by which he has defended them, and to yield the command to the spiritual or internal man. He is left to consider this in order that he may be free to choose what he will. When the natural man, apart from the spiritual, considers this, he rejects it, for he loves his lusts because he loves himself and the world. Hence he becomes anxious and supposes that if these were got rid of, he would have no life left. For the natural or external man is everything to him. Or he supposes that afterwards he could do nothing of himself, and that all his thoughts, desires, and actions would flow in through heaven, thus that he would not be his own master any longer. When the natural man, on being left to himself, is in this state, he draws back and resists. But when some light flows into his natural through heaven from the Lord, he begins to think differently, namely, that it is better for the spiritual man to have the supremacy, because thereby he can think and will what is good, and so can come into heaven. But not if the natural man were to rule. And when he reflects that all the angels in the universal heaven are of this character, and that they are consequently in unspeakable joy, he then fights with the natural man, and at last desires it to be subordinated to the spiritual man. In this state is placed the man who is to be regenerated, in order that he may be free to turn to what he will. And so far as he turns to this in freedom, so far he is being regenerated. All this is treated of here in the internal sense. Number 5651. And take us for servants and our asses. This signifies until whatever is in both naturals be as nothing, as is evident from the representation of Jacob's 10 sons who say this of themselves, namely truths in the natural, and from the signification of servants, namely things of slight importance, here of none at all, see below, and from the signification of asses, namely things in the natural or external knowledges, here in the exterior natural, because the truths signified by Jacob's sons are in the interior natural. In regard to whatever is in both naturals being as nothing, the case is this. In order that a man may become spiritual, his natural must become as nothing, that is, become incapable of doing anything of itself. Because in so far as the natural is capable, so far the spiritual is incapable. For the natural has imbibed from infancy nothing but the lusts of self and of the world, thus those contrary to charity. These evils prevent the influx of good through the internal man from the Lord. For whatever flows in is changed in the natural into evil, the natural being the plane in which the influx terminates. And therefore, unless the natural, that is, the evil and falsity which have formed it, becomes as nothing, good cannot possibly flow in through heaven from the Lord. It has no abiding place, but is dissipated, for it cannot stay in evil and falsity. It is for this reason that the internal is closed until the natural becomes as nothing. This also is known in the Church from the doctrine that the old man must be put off in order that the new may be put on. Regeneration is nothing but the subjugation of the natural and the dominion of the spiritual. And the natural is subjugated when it is reduced to correspondence. When the natural has been reduced to correspondence, it does not react any more, but acts as it is commanded, and obeys the spiritual, almost as the acts of the body obey the behest of the will, and as the speech and the expressions of the face conform to the influx of the thought. From this it is plain that for a man to become spiritual, the natural must needs become as nothing whatever in respect to willing. But be it known that it is the old natural that must become as nothing, because this has been formed from evils and falsities. And when it has become as nothing, the man is then endowed with a new natural, called the spiritual natural. Spiritual because the spiritual acts through it and manifests itself through it, as the cause through the effect. It is known that the cause is everything in the effect. Hence, the new natural in thinking, willing, and producing effect is nothing else than the representative of the spiritual. When this comes to pass, the man receives good from the Lord. And when he receives good, he is endowed with truths. And when he is endowed with truths, he is perfected in intelligence and wisdom. And when he is perfected in intelligence and wisdom, he is blessed with happiness to eternity. Number 5652. And they came near to the man that was over Joseph's house. This signifies the doctrinals of the Church, as is evident from the signification of the man over Joseph's house, namely that which is of the external Church, thus doctrine, for this is of the Church. Moreover, man signifies truth, and thus doctrine, and a house the Church. And as Joseph is the internal, Joseph's house is the internal Church. Doctrine from the Word is what is over this house, in serving and ministering. Number 5653. And they speak unto him at the door of the house. This signifies taking counsel of them about introduction, as is evident from the signification of to speak to the man who was over Joseph's house, namely, to take counsel of them, that is, of doctrinals, and from the signification of the door of the house, namely, introduction. Here from the natural or external man to the spiritual or internal, which is the subject treated of. As this is signified, it is not said in the original, at the door of the house, but the door of the house. Number 5654. And said, O my Lord. This signifies attestation, as is evident from this very form of speech, which is one of attestation, namely, that they will tell the truth about the silver that was found in the mouth of everyone's bag. Number 5655. We came indeed down in the beginning to buy food. This signifies a disposition to procure good for truths, as is evident from the signification of coming down, namely, a disposition or an intention. For he who comes down or betakes himself anywhere does so with an intention, here to procure good for truths, signified by to buy food. For buying signifies procuring and appropriating, and food the good of truth. Here good for the truths represented by Jacob's sons, who say this of themselves. Number 5656. And it came to pass when we came to the inn and we opened our bags. This signifies introspection into the exterior natural, as is evident from the signification of an inn, namely the exterior natural in general, and from the signification of opening, namely introspection, for he who opens does so to look in, and from the signification of a bag specifically, namely the exterior natural. Number 5657. And behold every one silver in the mouth of his bag. This signifies that it was clearly seen that truths had been given as it were freely, as is evident from the signification of every one silver in his sack, namely truths given freely. It is similar with every one silver in the mouth of his bag, with the difference that by this are signified the truths that had been given freely, and that had been stored up in the threshold of the exterior natural. For by the mouth of the bag is signified the threshold of the exterior natural. As it were given freely is here signified, because they are in a state of doubt as to whether they would be willing to be conjoined with the internal and become as nothing. And when anyone is in a state of doubt, he feels doubtful also about the truths which confirm. Number 5658. Are silver in full weight. This signifies truths according to each one's state, as is evident from the signification of silver, namely truth, and from the signification of weight, namely the state of a thing as to good. Thus, truths according to each one's state means according to the good they are capable of receiving. Weights and measures are mentioned in many passages of the Word, yet in the internal sense they do not signify weights and measures, but weights signify the states of a thing as to good, and measures the states of a thing as to truth. So also do heaviness and extension. Heaviness in the natural world corresponds to good in the spiritual world, and extension to truth. The reason is that in heaven, which is the source of correspondences, there is no heaviness and no extension, because there is no space. Things indeed appear heavy and extended among spirits, but these are appearances arising from states of good and truth in a higher heaven. That silver signifies truth was very well known in ancient times. Hence the ancients distinguished the several ages of the world from first to last into the golden, the silver, the copper, and the iron ages, to which they added an age of clay. They called those times the golden ages when there was innocence and integrity, and when everyone did what was good from good and what was just from justice. They called those times the silver ages when there was no longer innocence, but still a kind of integrity that consisted not in doing good from good, but in doing truth from truth. And they gave the name of copper and iron to the ages which are yet lower. They thus designated these periods not from comparison, but from correspondence. For the ancients knew that silver corresponds to truth, and gold to good, and this by communication with spirits and angels. For when good is spoken about in a higher heaven, there is an appearance of gold among those who are beneath them in the first or lowest heaven. And when truth is spoken of, there is an appearance of silver, sometimes so that not only the walls of the room where they dwell sparkle with gold and silver, but also the very atmosphere. Tables of gold also, golden lampstands, and many other things, appear with the angels of the first or ultimate heaven, who are in good from good, while to those who are in truth from truth, such objects appear of silver. Yet who at the present day knows that it was from their correspondence that the ancients called these the gold and silver ages? Indeed, who at this day knows anything about correspondence? And he who does not know this, and still more he who thinks it pleasurable and wise to dispute whether it is or is not so, cannot know the least of the countless things of correspondence. Number 5659. and we have brought it back in our hand. This signifies that what had been given freely would be in submission as far as possible, as is evident from the signification of to bring back here, namely to submit, and from the signification of in our hand, namely as far as possible. Its having been given freely is signified by the silver in the mouth of the bag which they had brought back. Number 5660. And other silver have we brought down in our hand to buy food. This signifies that there is a disposition to procure good by means of truth from another source, as is evident from the signification of silver, namely truth. And as silver signifies truth, the other silver signifies other truth, consequently truth from another source. As there is no genuine truth but that which is from the Lord who bestows it freely, so truth itself is from no other source. And from the signification of bringing down, namely an intention to procure, that is the good of truth signified by the corn they were to buy. The historical sense of the letter implies that the other silver also came to Joseph to buy food from him, and therefore did not come from any other source. But the internal sense does not reside in the historical sense of the letter, with which it is not concerned, but resides in the matter treated of. And the matter is that if they were to be subjected as servants because some truths in the exterior natural had been bestowed freely, they would procure good by means of truth from some other source. Such also is the sequence of thought in the internal sense, for it is presently said, "We know not who put our silver in our bags," which signifies that they would not believe, because they did not know the source of the truth in the exterior natural. Something similar takes place in the other life with spirits who are being initiated into good by means of truths, and especially into this one, that all good and truth flow in from the Lord. When they perceive that everything they think and will flows into them, thus that they have no power to think and to will from themselves, they resist as much as they can, believing that if this were so they would have no life of their own, and thereby that all delight would perish, for they take delight in what is their own. Besides, if they cannot do good or believe truth of themselves, they suppose they should fold their hands, doing and thinking nothing from themselves, and should wait for influx. They are permitted to think so, and almost to conclude that they do not desire to receive good and truth from this source, but from some other, which would not involve such a loss of what is their own. And sometimes they are allowed to inquire where they may find it. Yet afterwards, when they find it nowhere, those who are being regenerated come back, and in freedom choose to be led by the Lord in their willing and thinking. They are then informed that they will receive a heavenly selfhood, such as angels have, and with this also blessedness and happiness to eternity. This heavenly selfhood comes forth from the new will given by the Lord, and differs from the man's in the fact that they who have it no longer regard themselves in each and all things they do, learn, or teach. But they then have regard to the neighbor, the public, the church, the Lord's kingdom, and thereby the Lord himself. It is the ends of life that are changed. The ends that look to lower things, that is, to self and the world, are removed, and ends that look to higher things are substituted. The ends of life are nothing else than the man's life itself, for they are his very will and love, because what a man loves he wills and has for his end. He who is endowed with heavenly selfhood is also at rest and in peace, for he trusts in the Lord and believes that nothing evil will reach him, and knows that lusts will not infest him. And besides, they who are in heavenly selfhood are in freedom itself, for to be led by the Lord is freedom, because they are led in good, by good, to good. From this it is evident that they are in blessedness and happiness, for there is nothing that disturbs them, nothing of the love of self, consequently nothing of enmity, hatred, or revenge. Nor is there anything of the love of the world, consequently nothing of fraud, fear, or unrest. Number 5661. We know not who put our silver in our bags. This signifies non-belief from ignorance of the source of truth in the exterior natural, as is evident from the signification of not knowing, namely in the spiritual sense, not believing or non-belief. From the signification of who put, namely ignorance from what source. From the signification of silver, namely truth. And from the signification of a bag, namely the exterior natural. Number 5662. And he said, Peace be to you, fear not. This signifies that it is well, let them not despair, as is evident from the signification of peace, namely welfare, see below, and from the signification of fear not, namely let them not despair. For the internal sense treats of a change of state, in that they no longer procure truths and through them good by their own power, but are presented with them by the Lord. And because they had supposed that they would thus lose their own, thus freedom, and consequently all the delight of life, they were in despair, as is plain from what has gone before. Hence it is that fear not here signifies let them not despair. For fear arises from various causes, and therefore also signifies various things. Peace denotes it as well, because it is the inmost, and hence the universally reigning thing in each and all things of heaven. For peace in heaven is like spring on earth, or like the dawn, which does not affect us by sensible changes, but by a universal cheerfulness that flows into everything perceived, and permeates not only the perception itself, but also the several objects. At the present day scarcely anyone knows the meaning of peace, when mentioned in the word, as in the benediction, Jehovah lift up his face upon thee, and give thee peace, and in other places. Almost everyone believes peace to be security from enemies, and also tranquillity at home and among companions. Such peace is not meant in this passage, but a peace that immeasurably transcends it, the heavenly peace just now spoken of. This peace can be bestowed on no one unless he is led by the Lord and is in the Lord, that is, in heaven where the Lord is all in all. For heavenly peace flows in when the lusts arising from the love of self and the love of the world are taken away. These banish peace, for they infest man's interiors, and at last cause him to make rest consist in unrest, and peace in annoyances, because his delight is in evil. So long as man is in evil, he cannot possibly know what peace is, nay, he so long believes that such peace is nothing. And if anyone says that it becomes perceptible when the delights from the love of self and the world are taken away, he laughs, because he makes peace consist in the delight of evil, which is the opposite of peace. Because peace is the inmost of all happiness and blessedness, and hence the universal that reigns in them all, the ancients used as a common salutation, Peace be unto you, when they wished anyone well, and asked whether people had peace, when they meant, Is it well? See what has been said and explained above regarding peace, namely, that peace in heaven is like spring and the dawn on earth. That peace in the supreme sense is the Lord, in the representative sense his kingdom, and that it is the Lord's divine effecting with good from the inmost. That all unrest is from evil and falsity, but peace from good and truth. Number 5663. Your God and the God of your Father. This signifies the Lord's divine human, as may be seen from the fact that where God or Jehovah is mentioned in the word, the Lord and no one else is meant. And when it is said, Your God and the God of your Father, that is, the God of Israel and of Jacob and his sons, it means the Lord's divine human, and indeed as to the divine natural. For Israel represented the Lord as to the interior natural, Jacob as to the exterior, and his sons as to the truths in this natural. That the Lord was meant in the word by God and Jehovah, the Jewish church did not know, nor does the Christian church know it at this day. The Christian church has not known it because it has divided the divinity into 3 persons. But the ancient church which was after the flood, and above all the most ancient church which was before the flood, understood by Jehovah and God no other than the Lord, and him indeed as to his divine human. They also knew about the divine itself which is in the Lord, and which he calls his Father. Yet they were not able to think about that divine itself which is in the Lord, but about the divine human. And consequently they could not be conjoined with any other divine. For conjunction is effected through thought of the understanding and affection of the will. Thus through faith and love. For if we think of the divine itself, the thought falls as it were into a boundless universe, and thus is dissipated, whence there is no conjunction. It is otherwise when the divine itself is thought of as the divine human. And the ancients knew that they could not be saved unless they were conjoined with the divine. Therefore it was the divine human that the ancient churches worshipped, and Jehovah also manifested himself to them in the divine human. The divine human was the divine itself in heaven, for heaven constitutes one man, which is called the grand man, as has been shown above at the end of the chapters. This divine in heaven is none other than the divine itself, but in heaven it is as a divine man. This man is what the Lord assumed, and made divine in him, and united to the divine itself as it had been united from eternity. For from eternity there was a one. He did this because mankind could not otherwise have been saved. For it was no longer sufficient for the divine itself to be able, through heaven and thus through the divine human there, to flow into human minds. Wherefore the divine itself willed to unite the divine human to itself, actually by the human assumed in the world. The one and the other is the Lord. Number 5664. Gave you a hidden gift in your bags. This signifies that it was from him apart from any prudence of theirs, as is evident from the signification of a hidden gift, namely the truth and good given by the Lord without the man's knowing it, and from the signification of silver brought back in the sacks or in the bags, namely apart from any power of theirs. From this it is plain that gave you a hidden gift in your bags signifies that from him, that is, from the Lord's divine human, is truth and good in the natural apart from any power of theirs. And because it is apart from their power, it is apart from their prudence. The word prudence is used because prudence corresponds to providence, and that which is of the divine providence is not of man's prudence. Number 5664a. Your silver came to me. This signifies that it will seem like truth procured by them, as is evident from the signification of silver, namely truth. Their silver coming to him means that they bought, and thus that they themselves procured. For to buy is to procure. Thus your silver came to me signifies truth procured by them. But as the truth of faith is never procured by any man, but is infused and given by the Lord, and yet seems as if acquired by man, it is said that it will seem like truth procured by them. It is known in the Church that truth is infused and given by the Lord, for it is taught that faith is not from man, but from God. Thus not only trust, but also the truths of faith are from him. Still it appears as if the truths of faith were procured by the man, for he is quite ignorant that they flow in, because he does not perceive this. The reason why he does not perceive it is that his interiors are closed, so that he cannot have perceptible communication with spirits and angels. And when the interiors are closed, the man can know nothing whatever about influx. Be it known, however, that it is one thing to know the truths of faith, and quite another to believe them. They who merely know the truths of faith commit them to memory, just as they do the facts of any other branch of knowledge. Man can procure these truths for himself without such influx, but they have no life, as is plain from the fact that an evil man, even the worst, can know the truths of faith just as much as an upright and pious man. But, as before said, these truths have no life with the evil. For when an evil man produces them, he regards in every one of them either self-glory or gain, so that it is the love of self and of the world that inflates them and gives them a sort of life. But it is such life as there is in hell, which is called spiritual death. Hence he produces them from the memory and not from the heart, whereas he who believes the truths of faith produces them from the heart at the same time as from the lips. For with him the truths of faith are so deeply rooted as to have their root in the outer memory, and to grow from there towards what is interior or higher, like fruit-bearing trees. And like trees they deck themselves with leaves, and at last with blossoms, for the sake of bearing fruit. So it is with such a man. He also aims at nothing else through the truths of faith than uses, which are the practices of charity, and to him are the fruits. These are the truths which man cannot procure for himself even in the smallest degree, but they are freely bestowed on him by the Lord, and this at every moment of his life, nay, if he will believe it, without number at every moment. But as man is such as to have no perception of their flowing in, for as before said, if he had the perception he would resist, because he would believe that he would then lose his own, and with this his freedom, and with his freedom his delight, and would thus become a thing of naught. It is therefore provided that every man thinks that he procures truths of himself. This then is what is meant by saying that it will seem like truth procured by them. Moreover, in order that a heavenly selfhood and heavenly freedom may be bestowed on man, he must needs do good as of himself, and think what is true as of himself. But when he reflects, he should acknowledge that these are from the Lord. Number 5665. And he brought Simeon out unto them. This signifies that it adjoined will to truths, as is evident from the representation of Simeon, namely faith in the will, or the will to do the truth of faith, and from the representation of the sons of Jacob, who are they unto whom he brought out Simeon, namely the truths of the church in the natural. From this it is plain that his bringing Simeon out unto them signifies that it adjoined will to truths. Number 5666, verses 24 to 28. And the man brought the men to Joseph's house, and gave water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. And Joseph came to the house, and they brought him the present which was in their hand to the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And he asked them of their peace, and said, Is there peace to your father, the old man of whom ye spake? Is he yet alive? And they said, There is peace to thy servant our father, he is yet alive. And they bent themselves and bowed themselves down. And the man brought the men to Joseph's house, signifies initiation to conjunction with the internal, and gave water, signifies a general influx of truth from the internal, and they washed their feet, signifies a consequent purifying of the natural, and he gave their asses provender, signifies instruction concerning good, and they made ready the present, signifies conciliation, against Joseph came at noon, signifies until the internal should be present with light. For they heard that they should eat bread there, signifies a perception that good would be adjoined to truths. And Joseph came to the house, signifies the presence of the internal. And they brought him the present which was in their hand to the house, signifies conciliation as far as possible. And bowed themselves to him to the earth, signifies humiliation. And he asked them of their peace, signifies perception that it is well. And said, Is there peace to your father, the old man of whom ye spake? Signifies also with spiritual good. Is he yet alive? Signifies that it has life. And they said, There is peace to thy servant our father. Signifies a perception therefrom of the natural that it is well with the good from which it comes. He is yet alive, signifies, and that it has life. And they bent themselves and bowed themselves down, signifies outward and inward humiliation. Number 5667. And the man brought the men to Joseph's house. This signifies initiation to conjunction with the internal, as is evident from the signification of to bring the men to Joseph's house, namely to adjoin to the internal the truths of the natural. Initiation to conjunction is signified, as is clear from what follows, that they ate there, and that Joseph did not then manifest himself to them, by which is signified a general influx, which is now described, and which also is initiation. Number 5668. And gave water. This signifies a general influx of truth from the internal, as is evident from the signification of water, namely truth, and indeed truth in general. Hence giving water signifies a general influx of truth. It is from the internal because it was in Joseph's house. A general influx of truth is the enlightenment giving the capacity of apprehending and understanding truth. This enlightenment is from the light of heaven that is from the Lord, which light is nothing but the divine truth. Number 5669. And they washed their feet. This signifies a consequent purifying of the natural, as is evident from the signification of washing the feet, namely, the purifying of the natural. Number 5670. And he gave their asses provender. This signifies instruction concerning good, as is evident from the signification of to give provender, namely, to instruct in good. For provender signifies the good of the truths of external knowledges, and to give provender, which is to feed, signifies to instruct in this good. Feeding is instructing, see number 5201, and asses signify external knowledges, see number 5492. From this it is plain that giving asses provender signifies instruction about the good of external knowledges. The good of external knowledges is the delight from the truths of these knowledges. The truths of external knowledges are most general truths, which appear in the natural light which is from the light of the world. But in order that they may appear, that is, as truths, there must be a general influx from the internal. This is the enlightenment from the light of heaven. Number 5671. And they made ready the present. This signifies conciliation, as is evident from the signification of a present, namely, to obtain favor. Thus to make ready the present is conciliation. Number 5672. Against Joseph came at noon. This signifies until the internal should be present with light, as is evident from the signification of against he came, namely, when it should be present, from the representation of Joseph, namely, the internal, and from the signification of noon, namely, a state of light. Noon denotes a state of light because the times of the day, such as morning, noon, and evening, correspond to enlightenments in the other life, and the enlightenments there are those of intelligence and wisdom. For in the light of heaven there is intelligence and wisdom. There are alternations of enlightenment there, like morning, noon, and evening on earth. The states of shade, like those of evening, do not arise from the sun there, that is, the Lord who is always giving light, but from the angels' selfhood. For insofar as they are immersed in their selfhood, they come into a state of shade or evening. And insofar as they are lifted out of their selfhood into a heavenly selfhood, they come into a state of light. From this it is plain why noon corresponds to a state of light. Number 5673. For they heard that they should eat bread there. This signifies a perception that good would be adjoined to truths, as is evident from the signification of hearing, namely perception, from the signification of to eat, namely to be appropriated and conjoined, and from the signification of bread, namely the good of love. Number 5674. And Joseph came to the house. This signifies the presence of the internal, as is evident from the signification of to come to the house, namely to be at hand, or presence, and from the representation of Joseph, namely the internal. Number 5675. And they brought him the present which was in their hand to the house. This signifies conciliation as far as possible, as is evident from the signification of the present that was given to kings and priests, namely to obtain favor, thus also conciliation, and from the signification of being in their hands, namely as far as possible. Number 5676. And bowed themselves to him to the earth. This signifies humiliation, as is evident from the signification of to bow down to the earth, namely to humble oneself. Number 5677. And he asked of their peace. This signifies perception that it is well, as is evident from the signification of to ask, namely to perceive another's thought, and from the signification of peace, namely welfare. Number 5678. And said, Is there peace to your father, the old man of whom ye spake? This signifies also with spiritual good, as is evident from the signification of peace, namely welfare, and from the representation of Israel, who is the father here, namely spiritual good. Number 5679. Is he yet alive? This signifies that it has life, as is evident from the signification of living, namely spiritual life. Number 5680. And they said, There is peace to thy servant our father. This signifies a perception therefrom of the natural, that it is well with the good from which it comes, as is evident from the signification of to say, namely to perceive, from the signification of peace, namely welfare, and from the representation of Israel, namely spiritual good. This good is called father because from it as from a father are the truths and goods in the natural represented by his 10 sons. And because the truths and goods in the natural are represented by them, the natural also is signified by them. For the natural is the containant, and the truths and goods therein are the contents, which make a one. From this it is plain that their saying, There is peace to thy servant our father, signifies a perception therefrom of the natural, that it is well with the good from which it comes. It is called a perception therefrom, that is from the internal represented by Joseph, because all the perception of the natural comes from the spiritual, and being from the spiritual, it comes from the internal, that is through the internal from the Lord. The natural never has any perception, nor even any life of thought and affection, except what comes from the spiritual. For in the natural all things are of themselves dead, but they are vivified by influx from the spiritual world, that is, through the spiritual world from the Lord. In the spiritual world all things live from the light which is from the Lord. For in this light is wisdom and intelligence. That here there is signified a perception therefrom, or from the internal and the natural, follows also from what has been said above. Number 5681. He is yet alive. This signifies, and that it has life, as is evident from what was said just above, number 5679. Compare also number 5407. Number 5682. And they bent themselves and bowed themselves down. This signifies outward and inward humiliation, as is evident from the signification of bending themselves, namely outward humiliation, and from the signification of bowing themselves down, namely inward humiliation. For bending is a less degree of bowing down, and therefore it denotes outward humiliation, and bowing down is a greater degree, and therefore it denotes inward humiliation. Moreover, bending denotes the humiliation of truth, that is, of those who are in truth, thus of the spiritual. And bowing down denotes the humiliation of good, that is, of those who are in good, thus of the celestial. In this case also bending is outward humiliation, and bowing down inward. For they who are in good are more interior men than those who are in truth. These things are contained in the internal sense of this passage. Most of them have been explained by simply giving the meanings of the words, because they have been explained before. Number 5683, verses 29 to 34. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw Benjamin his brother, his mother's son, and said, Is this your youngest brother, of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his compassion was moved towards his brother, and he sought to weep. And he came to the bedchamber, and wept there. And he washed his face, and went out, and he restrained himself, and said, Set on bread. And they set on for him alone, and for them alone, and for the Egyptians, who did not eat with him, alone. Because the Egyptians cannot eat bread with the Hebrews, because this is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men were amazed one at another. And he brought out portions unto them from before his face. And he increased Benjamin's portion above the portions of them all 5 measures. And they drank, and drank largely with him. And he lifted up his eyes, signifies reflection. And saw Benjamin, signifies a perception of the intermediate. His brother, his mother's son, signifies the internal from the natural, as from a mother. And said, signifies perception. Is this your youngest brother, of whom ye spake unto me? Signifies the one born after all, as was also known to them. And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. Signifies that the divine is also with the spiritual of the celestial, which is the intermediate, because it proceeds from the celestial of the spiritual, which is truth from the divine. And Joseph made haste, signifies from the inmost. For his compassion was moved, signifies mercy from love. Towards his brother, signifies towards the internal from itself. And he sought to weep, signifies the effect of mercy from love. And he came to the bedchamber and wept there, signifies in itself, not openly. And he washed his face, signifies that it is so arranged. And went out, signifies by removal. And he restrained himself, signifies by concealment. And said, Set on bread, signifies perception of conjunction through the intermediate with truths in the natural. And they set on for him alone, and for them alone, signifies outward appearance that the internal was separated from them. And for the Egyptians who did eat with him alone. signifies separation of the external knowledges that are in inverted order. Because the Egyptians cannot eat bread with the Hebrews, signifies that they could not possibly be conjoined with the truth and good of the Church. Because this is an abomination to the Egyptians, signifies that they are in opposition. And they sat before him, signifies that they were set in order by his presence. The firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth, signifies according to the order of truths under good. And the men were amazed one at another, signifies a change of state of each one among them. And he brought out portions unto them from before his face, signifies goods applied to each one from mercy. And he increased Benjamin's portion above the portions of them all, signifies good for the intermediate above the goods for the truths in the natural. 5 measures signifies much increased. And they drank signifies the application of truths under good. And drank largely with him signifies abundantly. Number 5684. And he lifted up his eyes. This signifies reflection, as is evident from the signification of lifting up the eyes, namely thought and attention, and also observation. Thus it denotes reflection. For to reflect is to concentrate the intellectual sight, and to see whether a thing is so, and then that it is so. Number 5685. And saw Benjamin. This signifies a perception of the intermediate, as is evident from the signification of to see, namely to understand and notice, and from the representation of Benjamin, namely the intermediate. Number 5686. His brother, his mother's son. This signifies the internal from the natural as from a mother, as is evident from the representation of Benjamin, who is here the brother and mother's son, namely the internal. And as he is the intermediate, he therefore comes forth from the celestial of the spiritual, which is Joseph, as from a father, and from the natural as from a mother. For he must partake of both in order to serve as the intermediate. This then is what is meant by the internal from the natural as from a mother. And because the celestial of the spiritual, which is Joseph, in like manner came forth from the natural as a mother, but from the divine as a father, Benjamin is therefore called his brother, the son of his mother, as indeed he was by birth. And presently he is called also his son. The Lord, who is meant here by Joseph in the supreme sense, calls every one a brother who has anything of the good of charity from the Lord. He is also called the son of his mother, but then by mother is meant the church. Number 5687. And said. This signifies perception, as is evident from the signification of saying in the historical parts of the word, namely perception, see above. Saying is perceiving, because in heaven the very thoughts from which comes speech are perceived, otherwise than in the world. Hence it is that perceiving, in the spiritual sense, is speaking or saying, in the literal or natural sense. Number 5688. Is this your youngest brother of whom ye spake unto me? This signifies the one born last, as was also known to them, as is evident from the signification of the youngest brother, namely the one born last, see below. And from the signification of whom ye spake unto me, namely what was perceived by them. That to speak denotes what is perceived, thus what is known may be seen just above. Benjamin is here called, as he was, their youngest brother, that is the one born last, or the youngest in birth, because it is the same in the spiritual sense with the intermediate which Benjamin represents. For the intermediate is born in man last of all, because when a man is born spiritually, that is, when he is reborn, his rational, which is the internal human, is first regenerated by the Lord, and afterwards his natural. and as the intermediate partakes of both, of the rational made spiritual or made new, and also of the natural, and as it cannot partake of the natural unless this also is made new, therefore the intermediate cannot be born till afterwards, and indeed according to the degree in which the natural is being regenerated. All the things related in the word of Jacob's sons had so come to pass of providence, in order that the word might be written about them and their descendants, and might contain within it heavenly things, and in the supreme sense divine things, which they would represent in actual life. So also was it with Benjamin, who being born last would therefore represent the intermediate between the internal and the external, or between the celestial of the spiritual which the Lord had in the world, and the natural which the Lord also had and was to make divine. All that is related of Joseph and his brethren represents in the supreme sense the glorifying of the Lord's human, that is, how the Lord made the human in him divine. This is represented in the inmost sense, so that the word might be most holy in its inmost sense, and also that it might contain in every part what would enter into the wisdom of the angels. For it is known that angelic wisdom so far surpasses human intelligence that scarcely anything of it can be apprehended by man. It is also the happiness itself of the angels that every detail of the word has reference to the Lord, for they are in the Lord. Furthermore, the glorifying of the Lord's human is the pattern of man's regeneration, and hence man's regeneration also is presented in the internal sense of the word at the same time as the glorification of the Lord. Man's regeneration, together with its innumerable mysteries, also enters into the angels' wisdom, and affords them happiness according as they apply it to its uses, which are for man's reformation. Number 5689. And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. This signifies that the divine was also with the spiritual of the celestial, which is the intermediate, because it proceeds from the celestial of the spiritual, which is truth from the divine. As is evident from the signification of God be gracious, when said by the celestial of the spiritual, which is Joseph, to the spiritual of the celestial, which is Benjamin, and when the latter is also called his son, which means that the divine is also with the spiritual of the celestial, which is the intermediate, because it proceeds from the celestial of the spiritual, which is truth from the divine. That Benjamin is the spiritual of the celestial may be seen above, and also that this is an intermediate. As in the supreme sense, as before said, the Lord's internal human was the celestial of the spiritual, and this was truth from the divine, or the first clothing of the divine itself in the Lord, and as the spiritual of the celestial, which is the intermediate, proceeded therefrom, it follows that the divine was also with this. That which proceeds from anything derives therefrom its essence, but it is clothed with such things as serve for communication, thus for use in a lower sphere. The things with which it is clothed are taken from those of the lower sphere, to the end that the internal from which it proceeds may act in the lower sphere by such means as are there. That which gives the essence is as the Father, for the essence is the soul, and that which gives the clothing is the mother, for the clothing is the body of the soul. This is the reason why it was said above that the intermediate must partake of both in order to be an intermediate. What it has from the internal is as its father, and what it has from the external is as its mother. Number 5690. And Joseph made haste. This signifies from the inmost, as is evident from the signification of making haste here, namely what bursts forth from the inmost, because there follows, for his compassion was moved, which signifies mercy from love. When this bursts forth, it does so from the inmost, and this at first glance of the eye or at the first instant of thought. Wherefore by making haste here, Nothing else is signified than from the inmost. Number 5691. For his compassion was moved. This signifies mercy from love, as is evident from the signification of compassion being moved, namely, mercy from love. Mercy because he was not yet acknowledged by him, and from love because as an intermediate he had proceeded from him. In the original language, compassion is expressed by a word which signifies the inmost and tenderest love. Number 5692. Towards his brother. This signifies towards the internal from itself, as is evident from the representation of Benjamin, who is here the brother, namely the intermediate, thus also the internal. And as both the intermediate and the internal proceed from the celestial of the spiritual, which is Joseph, it is therefore called the internal from itself. Whoever receives anything of the divine from the Lord, who here is Joseph in the supreme sense, for example, he who receives any of the good of charity, is called by the Lord a brother and also a son. Number 5693. And he sought to weep. This signifies the emotion of mercy from love, as is evident from the signification of weeping, namely, the effect of mercy from love. Number 5694. And he came to the bedchamber and wept there. This signifies in itself not openly, as is evident from the signification of coming to the bedchamber, namely, in oneself, so as not to be seen. It was customary with the ancients to speak of entering into the chamber, and also of then shutting the door, when they meant the doing of anything that was not to be seen. This form of speaking was derived from the significatives in the ancient church, for by house in the spiritual sense they understood man, and by the rooms and bedchambers they understood man's interiors. Therefore, coming or entering into the chamber signified to be in oneself, consequently so as not to be seen. And because entering the chamber was significative, it is therefore frequently mentioned in the word, as in Isaiah, Go, my people, enter into thy bedchambers, and shut thy door after thee. Hide thyself as it were for a little moment, until the anger be overpast. That entering into the bedchambers does not here mean to do so literally, but to keep oneself in concealment and to oneself is very evident. In Ezekiel, He said unto me, Son of man, hast thou seen what the elders of the house of Israel do in the dark, every man in the chambers of his imagery? For they say, Jehovah seeth us not. Here, to do in the dark every man in the chambers of his imagery, denotes inwardly within themselves, in the thoughts. The interior things of their thought and affection were represented to the prophets by chambers, and were called chambers of the imagery. In Moses, Abroad the sword, and out of the chambers terror, shall bereave both young man and virgin, the suckling with the old man. Here the sword denotes the vastation of truth and the punishment of falsity. Terror out of the chambers denotes out of man's interiors. That the chambers here are not the chambers that are meant is evident. In David, Who watereth the mountains from his chambers. To water the mountains, in the spiritual sense, is to bless those who are in love to the Lord and in love to the neighbor. A mountain is the celestial of love, see Numbers. Hence, from his chambers is from the interiors of heaven. In Luke, Whatsoever ye have spoken in the darkness shall be heard in the light, and that which ye have spoken in the ear in the bedchambers shall be proclaimed upon the roofs. Here also bedchambers denote the interiors of man, namely what he has thought, what he has purposed, and what he has endeavored to do. In Matthew, When thou prayest, enter into thy bedchamber, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray in secret. To enter into the bedchamber and pray means not openly, for this was said representatively.